What is the definition of nostalgia? It is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. So when you think of a long-spanning franchise like Sonic the Hedgehog with over 33 years of history, oftentimes the word nostalgia can be associated with it. You all remember Green Hill and how it consistently appears in almost every Sonic game, much to the dismay of the Sonic fans. But then fast forward to the highly successful Sonic the Hedgehog movie franchise. The word nostalgia is something that may not be as synonymous with this movie franchise, or at least in particular, a lot of fans dislike the fact that maybe there's not as many references as something like the Super Mario movie, which basically every 5 seconds had a reference to the games. It almost felt like we were watching a Mario video game on the big screen. And speaking of the Mario movie, ever since this movie release, it's been a big contentious topic in the Sonic franchise as to whether or not the movies are faithful enough to the source material. And that brings us to the nature of today's discussion. This video is kind of like a vibe check. We have 5 months until Sonic Movie 3 comes out. We don't have a trailer, but of course, there is fan discourse, and the people, the viewers of this video, need to know what it is. It's really important. We need to know if this guy right here should borrow stuff from this guy right here's movies. All right, the discussion gets a little bit deeper than that. The story starts on Twitter when Discussing Film had released a tweet saying Junkie XL will return to compose the score for Sonic 3. So Tom Holkenborg, aka Junkie XL, is the composer for Sonic Movie 1, Sonic Movie 2, and Sonic Movie 3. And this is where the fan discourse begins. But however, we have some insight into this situation which I'd like to share with you after. So here's some of the sentiment of the fan base. It says, Sega has a whole symphony dedicated to celebrating the music of the Sonic franchise, and yet they chose extra large garbage for their most important film yet. Here's a big tweet which kind of gets into the argument we'll get into later. It says, I remember when some people were defending the team saying video game music won't fit the movie, and then Mario movie came and proved everyone wrong. Coming in at a staggering $1.36 billion for an animated film, it's safe to say that the Mario movie definitely was successful. Absolutely laughable how it's the third movie and we still haven't earned a composer who gives a shit about game music. Without reading every single individual tweet, because guess what? That will take a very long time for us to do. You understand what the sentiment is of the Sonic fan base with respect to the movie's musical choices. Depending on which aisle of the fence you sit on, I think everyone can agree that there really is a lack of in-game references for the most part. I mean, listen, there's definitely some in-game references, but for the most part, the music does not really match the Sonic games. It's kind of just like random generic tracks that they throw together for the movie. It's not to say that there's nothing. You know, during the Sonic vs. Knuckles fight scene, there is a slight riff of the drowning music, although no one can really hear it that well. At the end of Sonic Movie 1, there is like a little Green Hill riff. There are certain sectors of the online Sonic fan base, and I'll be very clear, it's the online Sonic fan base, which is a niche crowd that wishes we got something a little bit more faithful to the games. The Super Mario movie is obviously something that comes into mind for these people. When you look at Sonic the Hedgehog 1, it seems like a generic family-friendly plot that features Sonic as opposed to being an actual Sonic movie. With the success of Sonic Movie 1, obviously they've greenlit more sequels for the franchise, and now they can be a little bit more bold and creative because these have been proven to be successful. We're gonna get Shadow the Hedgehog on the big screen. We're gonna get Space Colony Arc. We're gonna get Maria, probably Super Sonic, Super Shadow, Chaos Emeralds, Professor Gerald Robotnik, Project Shadow. As a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, I gotta say, just, you know, for the record, just to take a pause from the discussion for a second, how proud I am of the movie franchise. Picture this gruesome image in your head of ugly Sonic. Now, when you first saw this trailer 5 years ago, did you think that we would make it this far to the point where we're gonna see Live and Learn, Shadow, actual Sonic lore? Like, just think about how far we came from this image right here. It's really insane to think about. But back to the discussion. Fans are wondering, why isn't there enough game elements in the movies? Why isn't there more Sonic music in the movies? There's such an extensive and iconic library of songs to choose from. So bring in Tyson Hess. For those of you who don't know who Tyson Hess is, he is a legend within the Sonic franchise. His fingerprints are all over the DNA of several Sonic projects. He helped write and animate Sonic Mania Adventures. He helped write and animate the Team Sonic Racing animation. Basically, almost every single pre-game animation he's worked on. He's helped with Sonic Colors Rise of Wisps. He's done cover art for the IDW comics, and most importantly, he played a pivotal role in the redesign of Sonic and actually probably saved the Sonic movie franchise. For Sonic 2, he was brought on as a co-producer, storyboard supervisor, and lead character designer. And that's probably underselling detailing his contributions to the franchise. I'm sure he's done a lot more, but that's just scratching the surface. So a comment from Tyson Hess, the man himself who is a pivotal part of the Sonic movies, has actually addressed the fan sentiment about there being a lack of Sonic elements in some of these movies, particular to the musical score. So here is an old forum post from the man himself, Tyson Hess, which recently resurfaced. This was made sometime shortly after Sonic Movie 2 was released. So this post right here was speaking about the drowning music scene in Sonic Movie 2. I'm not exactly sure what the context was, but allegedly I think Jeff Fowler or someone from Paramount was basically justifying the lack thereof of game music, and Tyson Hess expands upon the point. He says he is talking explicitly about the drowning music here. It's really frustrating when people don't listen to the words people actually say, and then people run with the misquote, and that becomes the whole conversation. But in this instance, I agree with him completely. You're supposed to be invested in the drama of the scene, not pointing at the screen and going, ooh, they did the thing. A little bit on, he responds to a user that also tags in about how people are there for the references / they did the thing, which Tyson also replies with his personal sentiment of that percentage. Someone said, at the end of the day, what happens when you're adapting stuff is people are here to see They Did the Thing, the movie, so I don't think playing 8 familiar notes for a couple seconds will take people out of it for too long, if at all, especially when the reason it's so iconic is for the exact one you're trying to convey. Tyson Hess expands upon this and says, I actually disagree with this assessment. The percentage of people in the theater that are catching references like the drowning themes and the box art poses is very small. I think I agree with that too. Some fans may be weighing their satisfaction in volume of references, but the majority of the audiences don't buy a ticket for an Easter egg hunt. There could be more musical nods in the movie for fan service, sure, but would having a few more notes of a recognizable melody actually make a scene better just by virtue of recognizing it from somewhere else? Personally, hearing something like this would ruin the whole moment for me. As a fan, I'd be too busy laughing at the thing. Someone says there's a certain expectation people have of Sonic music that's just not there, in which Tyson Hess does expand and improve his position for some of the people that are clamoring for more Sonic music. He says, this is the real issue in my opinion. There's a lot of room for improvement in the score, but the answer isn't in reusing old themes. I'll always want my new favorite thing rather than a repackaging of another thing I like. In a perfect world, the score would be so memorable and exceptional that no one would be trying to patch spackle it with old melodies. But even if it was a 10 out of 10 that felt Sonic-y to its core, I'm not 100% certain it would stop people from asking for more old stuff to be slid in. I guess that does come with the territory of being perceived as an adaptation. So that's just the thing. The man himself, Tyson Hess, if there's one person to take the side of the Sonic fans and give us Sonic Unleashed the movie, it would probably be him, right? He's the one that works the closest to the franchise and respects the source material more than anyone. And he said, instead of treading old waters and trying to recreate old Sonic tracks, why don't we make new songs that are just as memorable? So that's just the crux of the issue. Sonic fans are mad that Junkie XL is returning and composing the score for Sonic Movie 3. But there's been a lot of development since. The Tyson Hess comments were in 2022, right after Sonic Movie 2 came out. Since then, we've gotten the Mario movie, and we've seen the results. While the tweet about Junkie XL in the fan discourse is technically about the music, it is a symptom of a larger problem, and we kind of see this with the Knuckles TV show in terms of the fan reaction. Knuckles TV show was highly criticized by a lot of Sonic fans because it felt like it was a Wade Whipple show and not a Knuckles show. People thought it was a good opportunity to potentially dive into the lore and backstory of Knuckles. It could have been more of a Sonic show as opposed to a Wade Whipple show. But then you look at the Rotten Tomato score. The Knuckles TV show, while it's the lowest audience rated score, it's the highest rated amongst critics, you know, people who aren't necessarily Sonic fans. Can you believe that of all of the 3 Sonic movie projects that have released, the Knuckles TV show is the highest rated out of all of them? Granted, it's within a couple percentage points. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was a 69 on Rotten Tomatoes, certainly a decent score, but also a 96 amongst fans. Compared to the Super Mario movie, this had a lower Rotten Tomatoes score by 10 points and also did have a similar audience score. So the audiences were certainly pleased, at least on Rotten Tomatoes, with both films, but clearly Sonic movies were widely considered better than the Mario movies. While the Mario movie was certainly the more faithful video game one-to-one adaptation, most critics agree that the Sonic movies were better. They had a better plot as opposed to the Mario movie, which didn't really have much of a plot to some critics. As far as what makes a good movie, does it matter which movie has more references? No, it doesn't. A good movie can have a lot of references. A good movie can have no references. The same way a bad movie can have a lot of references as well as a bad movie having no references. There's really no correlation as to how many references equates to how good the movie is in terms of the eyes of the general public. However, there's no denying that in terms of the box office hauls, the Mario movie made 1.35 billion, whereas the entire Sonic movie series made 725 million, not including Knuckles. Make no mistake though, the Super Mario franchise is one of the biggest and most recognizable IPs in the world, so it's not really fair to compare the Sonic movie, especially compared to an Illumination animated Mario film, in terms of sales numbers, because that's completely different than the actual discussion of whether or not the movie's good, the fans like it. It's really a complex discussion. So obviously you have this balance between the creators' visions for the movies. You know, you want to create something as a creative that is your own. They're going to be heavily inspired by SA2, and personally, my personal opinion, I would like to see them include more SA2 game elements, more Sonic music, whatever the case may be. Also, recently it's been confirmed that Live and Learn will be in Sonic Movie 3. So clearly, I think there's going to be a big jump from the first Sonic movie to the last Sonic movie with respect to the video game references. This is obviously not rocket science. We know this. So I'm excited for Sonic Movie 3, but there is this big discourse and discussion about the music in the films. There's always been people criticizing the fact that maybe there's not enough game elements. It's probably possible that we're not even going to get Rouge and Amy in the Sonic Movie 3, which were integral parts of Sonic Adventure 2, so that's something to keep in mind. We can't forget that after Sonic Movie 3, what happens to Jim Carrey? Will he return as Eggman? If you assume that they're going to create more Sonic movies, which I think they will. I think they have a couple spin-offs in the works potentially. People have rumored this for a while. So what's next? You know, there's this big issue that the Sonic movie franchise has. This announcement and the fan discourse certainly underlies the symptoms of the larger problem that some fans have with the franchise. I'm personally excited. I'm optimistic. I'd like to hear what you guys think about this whole discourse. Where do you stand on this debate down below in the comments?